you. Thanks for tuning into the Waiting List podcast. I'm Long Long.
I'm Daniel.
And I'm Jacqueline. And we are three watch friends with a healthy obsession for watches.
So sit back and relax with us while we chat with collectors, industry giants, and share some good vibes.
Hey guys, welcome to a new episode of the Waiting List podcast. And today I'm joined by my co-host Daniel. Unfortunately, Long Long had to run for work emergency, so she can't join us for this episode. But in her place, I guess, I'm very excited to have on the guest today. And you have definitely heard of him on Instagram, if not read one or two of his blog posts. We have King Flum with us, and for podcast purposes, we'll refer to him as Flum. And welcome onto the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jack. Really appreciate it. Dan, appreciate you having me here. And first podcast. It was nerve-wracking. I felt this morning when I woke up, planning for this call. I was wondering what to expect, and it felt like how it felt back in the day, first job interview. So, yeah.
Well,
thanks for having me.
I'm sure Dan will make you feel comfortable. But a little bit of a background story. So, obviously we know each other on Instagram, but really started talking to each other thanks to the kind of sudden bloom of Clubhouse around this time last year. And it's really nice to see what you look like and chat face to face. But I guess jumping straight into it, for those who don't know you, or want to know a little bit more about yourself, can you tell us a brief introduction, where you're from, where you currently are, what you do for a living, and how you got into watches in general,
and your job qualifications, right? And why do you think you are suitable for this podcast?
So let me start with the final one, which is I don't think I'm suitable, but then Dan has poor judgment, as everyone knows. So here I am. And on that note, I guess, it's weird, Jack, because you mentioned it's weird to see what we look like. We've even spoken on the phone, if you recall, about the pieces that you were commissioning and not being able to see
ADC,
people. It's sort of kind of irrelevant now. It's weird. And indeed, it is nice to put a face to a name. And it's kind of why the in-person meetups are so good. But
for sure,
you'll realize quickly I go on tangents really quickly, so please stop me. But on the topic of who I am, I'm South African born. I actually grew up, of all places, in Zambia, but before that we lived a short period in Vancouver as well, in Canada. And then so I spent sort of my primary school years in Zambia, and I weirdly met another collector who went to the same school as me 20 years prior in Lusaka. And then I moved to South Africa, back home effectively, and studied there in boarding school for high school as well as university, finance background, worked in consulting for, I guess, 5 years or so, then moved to the UK to do a master's, and ended up staying. And so that wasn't the plan, but here I am 12 years later. In terms of work, I started off in consulting, but then when I came here, the reason I actually stayed was I got this random job offer through LinkedIn, and I didn't know what to expect, but I was trying to bootstrap a startup. So I took the job only for the money, just to get more money to fund the startup. And this job involved going to Iraq for work. And part of that was doing something they call hostile environment training before being allowed to go, because it's blue chip company, security they took quite seriously. The US Army was still in Iraq at the time. So we went off somewhere far north of England and got taught about IEDs, identifying them, knowing what to look out for, kidnap situations. We even got trained on different kinds of weapons. There were 2 cars. They do a scenario where you drive and they simulate coming under attack in a battlefield environment, and they don't give you a warning. You just go off in an armored vehicle. These are B6 armored, so the doors are really heavy. There's no space between the back seat and the boot because there's a little hatch to prevent fire coming from the back. And so this scenario is you're driving along and suddenly there's loud simulated real explosions, but they're not obviously hostile. And then you have to, they start screaming, your adrenaline goes up. And what's happening is they're pretending that one of the vehicles is immobilized, and you have to practice moving up, so making space for the occupants of that vehicle that's been immobilized to get into your vehicle. So you have to jump over a seat, and then they open the doors next to each other to form like a shield against incoming fire. People have to dive across into your vehicle, and then you speed away. And even though it's in the middle of England, it feels pretty scary. But after doing all of that, you have to do a time trial of exiting the back of the vehicle and the roof hatch. So that's in a scenario where you have to exit the vehicle and the doors aren't working. And if you don't do this within the time that the security team sets, you're not allowed to travel to Iraq. Anyway, so that already is quite exciting. But after doing that, then at that time, the commercial flights weren't cleared for security. So we fly to a place like Kuwait and then take a private jet into either Basra or Baghdad. And I used to do negotiations with the government for oil and gas contracts. And so that's why I would go to the Ministry of Oil in Baghdad. That's driving through downtown Baghdad to the ministry. And yeah, the job was just insanely exciting. And so I decided to stay, and I ended up doing that for a number of years. Then I worked on JV management, essentially joint venture management with actually PetroChina. So had some experience working with the Chinese. It's like an entirely different mindset, the way they operate. They send in people every 6 months to get trained up, learn the ways of the West, and take it back home. It's quite interesting to see how they operate versus other joint venture partners. But anyway, then I sort of did a bit of project management on oil and gas operational stuff. And I guess around the time I had a kid, I chose to move into renewables. And so I guess that was in 2016, 17, around there. And since then, I've just been doing development of renewables, still with blue chips, but now it's about long-term, large asset development. So offshore wind farms, utility scale solar, green hydrogen, and battery storage. So that's what I do now. And I guess that's it. Yeah. What did I miss?
No,
Well,
you covered far and beyond.
You should never underestimate the middle of England as being not rough. Right? Me and you know there's an invisible line, which basically is just above London. Okay, I'm joking, everybody. I'm joking. Don't take it too seriously. Yeah. Well, where did you come up with the name King Flum, though?
Wow, Dan, I knew this was coming. I put it this way: this is a story I never tell on the record, and one which I'll save for when we meet in person. Needless to say, it's really silly. It has no basis in fact whatsoever. The king is almost just a parody at this point. And a couple of weeks ago, I made this. Someone shared an app which you can make, amateur logos. And I made this logo where I tilted the crown purposely to seem like a jester. But it's absolutely the opposite of reality. I don't see myself that way, but it's funny, so I stick to it. And as to how it came about, yeah, I'll tell you in person one day.
Okay. Right.
Okay.
So that part's cut.
No, don't cut it. It's fine. Because people ask me this a lot. You'd be surprised. And it's also nice to leave. I don't know if you remember, there's this guy, Lou, who does unbox therapy videos on YouTube. And he's got like, I don't know, 15 million. So he had this cameraman, Jack, for the first 10 million subscribers, where he actually just referred to Jack and he used to point to Jack. And we never ever saw Jack, not in reflections, not in anything. And at some point, people were like, is this Jack guy real? And then it became a sort of running joke that he's not real. And this guy, Lou, the unbox therapy guy, is making him up. And he built it up to this point where one day they did a reveal for, I think it was 10 million subscribers. And Jack happened to be real. But so in that way, not that I'm Lou from Unbox Therapy, but I think just to keep something really random a secret for now is entertaining, at least. And small things amuse small minds, so I take that fine.
You said it, not me. Right.
Well, you thought it. Come on, Dan.
But how did you get into watches?
Yeah, obviously the point of why we're here. This is I guess I wrote the story briefly on that
you
blog.
did the first blog entry of your post, your blog.
Yeah, so it's true. I guess it wasn't about the mechanical nature of the watch. I think it was just maybe the typical boy attitude in me coming through, the obsession with gadgets and things. In my mind, that's what it was. It was another piece of tech. And back then we didn't have laptops and iPhones and so on. So I think that was probably the only piece of tech I owned, which was this tiny digital watch. And so I kind of connected with it. And weirdly, there was I remember this lady, she's still friends with my mom, but they had like a department store and there were these, like an entire bag full of digital watches, really cheap. And so she gave them to me and said, hey, pick whatever you want, sell the rest, do whatever you want, because we don't have any use for these. And so I started, so this was in Zambia, right? So when I was in primary school, and in Zambia and in Africa, we have staff at home. So people that do the gardening. There was one guy, Charles, who used to look after me as a kid. It's like a nanny, but also like a friend. We used to play football together. He used to push me on the swing, this type of thing. And so they obviously have a network of people around the location that we lived. And he just informed people like, hey, this guy's selling watches, and they'd tell their friends. And so within a few days, there were queues of people outside my yard at just after school time ended. And I'd be walking back from school and everyone's trying to buy watches. And that's my first sort of vivid memory of anything related to watches. But I guess, so I didn't grow up with like loads of money or anything. So mechanical watches, there is a story about my dad, who actually made and lost a bunch of fortunes actually in his time. And he owned a Patek and a Cartier lighter. So Patek and a Cartier lighter, which were his like prized possessions that got stolen. And I guess someone asked me, why don't you collect Patek? And I'm like, well, it's not that I don't like the brand. It's that I want to save the acquisition of a Patek for some momentous occasion. And I'm not sure what that is. And I feel that when the time comes, it'll feel right. And so I'll know at that point, this is the one it should be. Who knows when that'll happen? Who knows if it'll happen? But that's kind of this romantic idea that I sort of reserve in my mind. Anyway, so after those digital watches, the simple, cheap ones, I guess the first love was data banks and that remote control Casio watch. So it is very much digital, nothing to do with mechanical. And I had a bunch of those ones which glowed. They were really, really awesome. I remember going to the mall and turning TVs in the window on and off, changing the channels, that type of stuff, using it at school, getting it confiscated. So those are the memories I have from the younger days. And honestly, I think I don't even know when the mechanical obsession, I don't have a specific moment where I can point to and say that's where it kicked in. But I want to say it probably coincides with the point where all my major responsibilities financially were kind of taken care of. And then there was spare income to be used on, let's say, ostentatious things. And then that led to this rabbit hole, which I'm in right now, where I have chrono alerts going off on my phone. I spend a lot of time on Instagram talking about watches. I spend time offline writing about watches, reading about watches. And even when I read non-watch related content, I find myself trying to apply it to watches. So even if I'm reading economic forecasts, I'm like, how will this affect watches? It's sort of permeated all levels of my brain, and it's often tiring, but still very exciting.
How much time do you think you spend on watches a day? Like, be it looking at it, reading through chrono alerts, writing posts, or responding on Instagram or commenting. Like, how much time do you think you spend?
Before he answers that, yeah, like, give you some thinking time. Jack, do you even know what a data bank is?
What do you mean?
The Casio data bank.
No, I have no idea.
Yeah, so he's talking about a data bank, right? You don't even know. And I'm thinking, like, in my head, like, she's probably not from that era. Like, she doesn't even know. So when he's going saying like getting it confiscated and stuff like that and playing it around school, I know exactly what Flum is saying, right? Because that data bank, yeah, graduated into a proper TV like chunk control watch, right?
Okay.
With the infrared stuff. I'm not like.
No,
I'm not trying to patronize
I know
anything,
what
but
he is talking about. I knew just from how Flum described it, right? Like, I knew what kind of thing he was talking about, but I didn't know what it looked like. I remember we had a previous guest on who was talking about the TV controls or something, and then I was so confused because it sounded like to me that he had a watch that he brought to school and everyone thought he was the shit, right? Because he had that new Casio watch and he was able to change channels of TV through the watch, which I still don't get what he meant, like if that was possible.
because probably in your era you never had a TV in your classroom. Right?
No, I did, but how are you able to change the channels of a TV from your watch?
Because it's basically an infrared remote, right, on your watch. The Casio data bank, to be honest, right, when it started, it didn't have the remote control aspect to it. It was a calculator watch.
Yeah.
And to be honest, right, it's so dumb because you couldn't really use it. Like, you mispressed the plus button when it should have been the multiply button. And anybody that had one also had a calculator, right? Like, so it was totally useless, but it was very gimmicky. And then it graduated for some reason. Yeah, maybe because at the time, right, a lot of the TVs were made by Japanese companies. They weren't like Korean, right, or Chinese, And so it became very easy, and maybe it was a quirky idea. One of those boardroom meetings where someone said, "Why don't we make it so it's infrared?" Like, and then everybody goes, "Yeah, that's a great idea," but nobody actually stops to think, "Is that a great idea?" Anyway, it got made, but because it wasn't that great idea, it didn't actually last.
Yeah, I think, Dan, the data bank, honestly, I thought it was my recollection anyway. I might be just romanticizing the past, but I think it was pretty useful because we didn't have mobile phones, so we had landlines, and remembering everyone's numbers wasn't so easy. And of course, you had to enter the text the same way that we had SMSs, right? So you had number one was ABC and so on. So you had to enter all of that stuff, and then how do you remember everyone's home phone number? Like I remember vividly using that thing. But then I being OCD, like even in my current iPhone phone book, I have name and surname. I'm like quite. Some people have random. My brother-in-law has nicknames like Toes or like Wonky, whatever nickname he's made. So I'm like, I just rather save the name and the surname and be all sort of. So I used to be the same with that thing, and the remote thing. I guess today, so I have this like Harmony unifying system where some devices are infrared controlled, some devices are Bluetooth, like, the Fire TV or whatever, Apple TV. And this has an infrared sort of dongle where it projects whatever needs to happen. So the way that the system works is you press, I want to watch Apple TV, and it sort of turns on the AV receiver, it turns on the TV, and it turns on everything that needs to be on, sets it to the right, input setting and whatever. It still uses infrared. So I think the concept was good, but the problem is the programming was difficult, and that was the hard part.
I remember the name when it used to come across, right? Because you're an LCD crystal, right? LCD display. The name would just slowly ticker across the display like that. Damn, I used to hate it when you had to type in names like Christopher. I mean, like, come on, Christopher, come on, like, give me a break. Yeah.
Good time.
So what was the original question?
What was the original question? Oh, how much time you spend on watches a day, if you had to guess? Because you do a lot of stuff. You write the blog, you make creative videos on Instagram, you do photos, your captions are often, sometimes philosophical and tells a story. You do actual Instagram stories. Like, how much time do you spend?
Yeah. Your content makes my brain hurt. I've got a very immature brain, and when I look at stuff, and I think, oh man, I have to look at this with a dictionary next to me.
Nonsense, Dan. Come on. I guess this. So having to admit an answer is quite jarring to my brain. But then, like I said earlier, because I try and connect things to watches all the time, one could argue on the one hand that I spend my entire day thinking about watches, but in practice, I don't think it's that bad. So yesterday, as an example, was a fairly busy day for me, and so I had various meetings, project meetings, and in between, in my lunch break, I might have scrolled to look at the new releases from Watches and Wonders. I read a few papers on nickel, so commodity shortages, and so in doing that, I thought about EVs and the shortage of EVs, and then I was like, I wonder how this will affect the watch industry. But I never really followed that through because I was too busy. But on the previous day, I had time after reading those things, so I was like, oh, let me think this through, and I kind of applied it further, and then that's typically how I'll end up writing a longish story. Yesterday, I saw a Collected Man posted that they're going to do auctions now. And I had a lot of thoughts on the matter around, because I previously wrote about Double Wrist, Loop This, and all these different auction platforms. And now a Collected Man is doing it. And I think, just as a sidelight, I think that's a good thing for consumers. But I had thoughts on what I would maybe want to write as a long form story, just sharing some thoughts, but I didn't have time, so I didn't do it. So I'd say, in general, it depends on the day, but a good chunk of it, I'd say 35-40% maybe.
Okay. Well, follow-up question to that, because we were also talking about it. How would you give your opinions on the online auction platform, and now with so many online platforms popping up, like, what's your general take on it? From, I guess, since you think so much, you consider both sides, on both the consumer side versus the retail and the brand side.
Yeah, fair question.
And the third party trading side.
So let's just sort of like break this down into a few silos. So for starters, there's this insane premium that's charged by grey dealers, where they don't actually have to do a lot of work, and I think consumers suffer for that. So simple stuff like Pepsi, Daytona, these types of watches, they sell themselves, right? And so what they're doing is they're finding people who are in a crunch and using working capital to get it off them quickly, and then just adding on 25-30%. And when you speak to them, they'll say, yeah, but we have to pay taxes and we have to do this and that, and we're running a proper business, we have overheads. Yeah, that's nice, but who asked them to do that? Like, if we had a peer-to-peer platform where we can just say, okay, I don't know what the market price of these things is right now, but let's say a Pepsi, for the sake of argument, is £15,000 that dealers are paying owners, right? And then they're going to the market and putting them there for like 18 to 20,000 pounds. So that's, for the sake of argument, let's say 20,000. So they're adding on 5,000, so 33% markup. After they do their taxes and overheads, maybe they're making 10 to 15. Fine, but like they don't have to do that. If you and I connected on an auction platform, and say the dealer market value is 15, and so for the sake of argument, I paid you 16, and me in an open market would have had to otherwise pay a dealer 20. That's a win for everyone, right? Because you're happy getting 16 instead of 15, and I'm happy paying 16 instead of 20. And okay, these are just round numbers for the sake of argument, but you get the point. Now, that works with these sort of commodity type watches, but when it comes to things like, I don't know, Vianney's minute repeaters and all these really, really insane special watches, there's an interview that Silas Walton did on this topic about what service they bring. Like, I think there's value in their brand, the trust, the sort of lifestyle angle, the way that people spending $1 million want to feel when they're buying these watches. It's something they add. And there's also the peace of mind, which we don't currently have in an auction platform. People still feel nervous, they still feel uneasy. So for those watches, I think that it's fair enough for people like a collected man to take a cut for the services they offer. And other than that, though, I think that auction platforms are good for consumers because they get closer to a market price. Now, the problem here is when the platforms take a huge chunk, like 25%. What for? That I feel that's a gap that needs to be closed. I think that that's why maybe a collected man running an auction is debatable. It'll depend on the watches, but something more closer to like Loopthis is a good platform, for example, but then they have high fees. I think it was 500 for listing. I don't know the exact details of how much they charge on sales.
500 per listing and 5% on sales.
Yeah, so I think that's actually getting closer to the right answer. I think that the percentage on sales, I believe, should vary according to the watch. There should be categories of watches. Things like I said, commodity type watches should have the lowest possible fee because most of the time they're sealed. Most of the time they're still under warranty. And so verification, like people don't even open those watches. They just sort of verify the authenticity. They have a purchase receipt because people are kind of just moving them on. Those don't need any quality control. They don't need any peace of mind, additional premium. They should just be passed between people for the lowest, friction fees, as it were. But as you go high up the scale, rarity matters, super vintage stuff, which needs authentication and so on. Yeah. What I mean is that the premium that gets paid should be justified. There shouldn't just be a blanket number that everyone has to pay for the service. That makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I kind of get that. So what you're saying is because like right now, a consumer will buy a watch, let's say you, Flum, buy one, right? And then, you can actually, because anybody at the end of the day can be a dealer, right? Right now in this world. So let's say you get the watch and then you know what, you get an offer from me and I'm a collector too. And then I suddenly say, you got 15, I'll pay you 20 for it. And then you know what, Jacqueline sees I've got it. And then she goes, I'll pay you 25, right? When actually, she could have just gone to you and just said, I just want to pay the true market price rather than an inflated kind of price. But it's a very interesting topic because people would argue that market price is what someone's willing to pay for a watch, right? Like, does it have to be representative of, but okay. I understand your point. Guess... Like auctions are 25% or 26 now. And I think
26, I think a collected man is 15.
15, yeah. And 10 on other some piece. 10 on I think the more expensive the piece is about 10. The lesser it's 15. And then Loopthis, like you said, is that really true? Like 5? Is that 5%? 5%? Yeah, that's pretty low. So maybe what you're seeing as well is people seeing that, looking at the auction houses, which are 26, and then thinking, hang on a minute,
yeah.
Maybe we can cut into that.
There's a gap there.
The thing is, there should be no reason for any. So the people that have the highest overheads and bricks and mortar establishments and so on, they're the worst people to be running these platforms because by definition they have to charge a higher fee to cover their sort of extra cost. But what we should question is the relevance or the necessity of those extra costs. And so like a completely online platform would be the way forward. But then the problem is, how do you verify things and how do you build that peace of mind? So it would be almost like a Collected Man spin-off where the trust is in the founders rather than the platform. And this thing has its own sort of books, its own balance sheet, and it doesn't have to justify the expense of all the random stuff that goes on. And I don't think there's a clear-cut answer at this point, but I think the thinking needs to move towards minimizing transaction costs and sort of finding a way to get consumers comfortable with what a sort of completely online platform does. And this idea of getting verified pieces every single transaction, I think, is probably not necessary.
Yeah, I do think, though, to be fair to these platforms like Collected Man, since we're talking about Collected Man, is that for that whole branding, and I know I like for a consumer like yourself, Flum, I'm assuming you don't really need that reassurance, right? But a lot of consumers in luxury, it is about the imagery. It is about like that feeling, that perception, and that feeling costs money. Yeah, like whether you like it or not, it costs money. So if somebody just put up a website, listed the same products as Collected Man, but didn't look like Collected Man and just looked like a Spotify site, actually said Spotify at the bottom, and didn't have all that investment into photos and everything, you just wouldn't be able to, I mean, forget being able to charge a premium. You might not even sell the watch, right?
Yeah, I mean, Silas said it on his interview, I believe. Like he saw a gap where taking really nice photos and posting them on eBay, his stuff sold for a higher price and quicker than other people. So yeah, of course. But then since he did it, everyone else is doing it. There's so many others. There's Mr. Watchley, every single new dealer now that's trying to tap into that area is doing the same. Awesome photography. I mean, let's be honest. In the last couple of years, watch photography in general has gone into a different league, right? Like it just, everything looks delicious. You see something, you're like, I need that. Like, why? You don't. And there's also a bit of work to be done on ourselves around how much we let this type of stuff affect us, right? This is the reason why brands are moving to like this whole influencer marketing stuff. Like brands like Oris are sending unreleased watches to just random members of the community, people like who are collectors who enjoy the watches, not necessarily have 50 to 100,000 followers. They're just generally known people in the watch community, and these people who take really nice photos are getting access to these watches and taking amazing pictures of them, and it's influencing the market. Of course they're going to keep doing it, but people need to just I write about this all the time. That's why I do it. And like, you guys don't need to buy every single watch. I have the same problem.
You have a very philosophical like approach to this hobby. I mean, just going back, because I did actually want to bring something up, but I didn't want to cut you up, which was, how you think about watches and you ingrain it like in a lot of what you do. It's kind of like your currency of thinking. Like that's actually very similar to me, because I see, watches are in essence, right? They give you a measurement of time, right? And time is the most expensive commodity in my book. Yeah. Like it's the most valuable. And how you use your time, how you perceive time, right? And even how, let's say, problems resolve over time, like on a very superficial layer. We always say, when someone's hurting, we always say, give them time, right? Like, and even when we talk about making friendships, and we always say like, time will tell, on this person. Like if you really think about it, yeah, time is the master. If you can master time, which ironically the British kind of did with the clocks and the watches, and then had the British Empire, it's a very powerful thing in that kind of respect. But if you can master your own time, yeah, that is a very difficult thing to achieve, but a very almost a serene place to get to, right? Yeah, that's my philosophical side coming out there. Yeah,
I enjoy that. I enjoy that very much.
Yeah,
it's something. Yeah, well, you're 100% right. I think Buffett even said the same thing. He's like, that's the bottom line, is I can buy anything I want except time. So yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. Very
And then
much so.
the other thing you said, which was the way, you know, the watches and the photography is elevated, you know, actually, you know, if we don't move away from watches and we look at just influencers that wear nice stuff, right? And I'm looking at, you know, I follow, you know, some people that dress nicely, and I'm looking at these photos and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, like, you look great, yeah, because your body's great. Like, I don't look like that when I wear it, you know. Like, I'm 5'8", you know, I'm not 6', 6'2", you know, and you know, that's not even including the makeup they put on. It's just imagery has that influence on us biologically, right? And you're touching on basically the impact of social media on our consumerism, like, developed habits, right? Because consumerism probably developed, I don't know, 80s, late 70s, right? Where, to be honest, most of us have got what we need, right? So how can we get people to buy more shit that they don't need, right? And,
Yeah.
you know, Instagram has ramped that up to a different level because the imagery like that was in magazines originally, where you'd have to buy a magazine, look at it, get influenced, is now there on 24/7. And something that I think you do kind of goes against that grain, because everything that you seem to put out there seems to have gone through some thought process rather than being reactive or something. It's something that I think you seem to take pride in.
Perhaps, yeah. I think, yeah, you're right. I think that's on point. I take pride in it because, and this is on reflection after I wrote that post, you might remember, about status, social status. And for a long time, I was under this impression that, you know, saying that you don't succumb to hype was, you know, moving yourself to one side, in effect. But what it actually is, and I'm guilty of this, saying, oh, well, I don't buy into hype, I'm the anti-hype. That in itself is a version of status. So the person saying that is saying, well, I'm better than you because I don't succumb to hype,
I'm
which
above
is
that.
ironic.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
ironic because being anti-hype is also in some ways a type of hype.
And weirdly, Jack, you say that, and I think that's exactly what it is. I think that today people now take more pride in saying I don't buy into the hype than they do wearing a hype watch, which is weird, but okay. And so, how do you, the reason why it's interesting to me is because, as you said, now initially consumers sort of got into this. So if we just play a quick sort of timeline version, first you could buy, let's use Rolex, the easiest one. Everyone's familiar with how it went down, kind of. You buy it in the window, sports models were available, except maybe the Daytona, but still, you know, you could get them. Then those disappeared because they were slightly above retail now, and so they were easy money. But then people started sort of keeping them, and AD started using them as bundled offer, sort of carrots to dangle. And then slowly this became a thing where more and more people outside the hobby realized how easy it seemed, because people were like, this is underrated, that is underrated. And so this snowball started. And that was fine for a while. And what you hear a lot today is collectors lamenting the fact that this is now a super hyped industry and you can't get anything and all of this stuff. But what's more interesting is how the brands have reacted in light of this new development. So now, you know, Baselworld's kind of gone. There's Watches and Wonders, but for instance, a few friends of mine were talking last night about how Patek's probably going to drop a few other watches, you know, in the rest of the year, like when they did the green Nautilus, and then a few weeks and months later they dropped other random stuff through the year. So now brands are like, well, we're going to make hay while the sun shines, and they're going to keep releasing new stuff, and people are expected to keep buying it. But the problem is, how many people have this sort of bottomless pit of money to just feed into all these new releases that are now coming way quicker than ever before? It doesn't make sense to me.
I agree. We had this conversation privately, like between the three of us, which was, I wouldn't say like our buying power is crap, you know, like Long, Jacqueline and me. And then when we can't get pieces, like you just have to just admit there are just so many people that are way like whales above you, right? There's just so many of them, right? And you're right, you know, brands are really, really cashing in at this stage, making the most of it, like being almost pretty cutthroat. But you know, everything is cyclical.
I have something to say about
everything is cyclical. Again, we go back to that issue of time. You know, it'll just eventually even out again. Jack.
Excuse me. But will it even out? Because I thought it would until I went to Switzerland and visited the boutiques. And it took a while for, you know, sales of brands to kind of open up and talk frankly, which is, if you want this, well, first, you know, there's that initial conversation about, hey, I'm really interested in this and this and this. I know that there's probably a wait list. I mean, I know there's 100% a wait list. I don't mind being on that list if I just wait, right? Like if you can confirm that I can get it, I don't mind waiting. But then the problem is you can't get on that list. So then you ask the question, wait, so if I can't get when 5 years ago, it used to be you walk into a store, sport models would just be sitting there. You try on the few pieces, you like one, you purchase it, right? As goes with all the other goods. Now it's like, okay, I'm a new consumer, I'm a new client of the brand. You walk into the boutique, there's nothing available. So you look at the paper print catalog, or you go on the website, they walk you through the website, and then you pick out, oh, that's interesting. How can I buy it? Well, there's none available. Oh, so is there a wait list? Yes, but but the wait list is closed. So what do you buy? Well, when there's nothing available. And then you ask the obvious question, so what do you have? Oh, we don't really have any in stock or in the store. We get shipments 2 times bi-weekly or whatever. And then after a while, you talk to them and then you get the sense, okay, so it's not that you don't have stuff to sell, but it's more like, okay, well, what do I buy to get the stuff I want? But wait, and then you realize, okay, to get something that's $50,000, $60,000, you might have to spend 5 times that amount. But it's even more.
Yeah, well,
which is information they don't tell you, right? Yeah, and then, but let me finish. And that plays in the initial question of what we're talking about, which is, well, why do you think gray market prices are that high? It's because the barrier to entry for these brands is that high for you to get standard sport models, because you have to pay an ultra premium. Dan.
Okay, so thanks. I was dying to go. Right.
I know, I was dying too. I was trying to get it out there.
I was gonna say, like, I don't have a crystal ball to say, you know, that this is gonna happen. But you know, the watch industry exists to make money, right? And they are making money. And the next thing is they're going to think is, how can I make even more money, right? And yeah, you're saying you need to spend this much. At the end of the conversation, there just aren't enough watches right now, right? For the demand, right? So it's not going to take that much of a genius to, especially, you know, considering a lot of these CEOs don't really stay in the position that long, to go, do you know what? Let's increase production because we actually can do it, right? And then one brand starts raking those figures in, and the next guy sees it and he thinks, do you know what? That's a good idea. I'm going to do the same thing, right? See if the market price can hold. And do you know what? If it doesn't hold, I'm out of the position anyway. I got my KPIs. I look great. I'm on to the next job, right? So because how can they make more money? They have to make more pieces, right? And there's clearly a demand for it. Would you not want to tap into that a little bit? Okay, we're not talking like increase like 200% here, 15% incrementally, right? To satisfy the market to some extent. It's possible.
Well, this is a broader question around brand management. So, you know, at some point, if Rolex, I keep coming back to them, but they're not a very good example.
It's the easiest to get, though, I guess.
well, yeah, I guess, but also they're very different in many ways. Like they don't answer to shareholders and so on. So I guess look at Patek, right? So outside of the thinking of the Stern Senior, he's now releasing all these wild colors in complicated watches. Why do you think that is? I think a few people have said this already online as well, is that they argue he's tapping into the younger consumers' need for something funky and modern, but also trying to stay true to what makes Patek, right? And so that's one view. Others are saying things like, well, a green dial perpetual calendar, like that's never been done before, and so we probably won't see this again for a while, implying that it's something very extraordinary, similar to how the Rolex Hulk green dial was. But actually, the same guy released a Tiffany Nautilus. Like if you were trying to get collectors into the complicated pieces, it would have not been a Nautilus. It would have been, I don't know, a 5370p in the Nautilus color. I mean, the Tiffany color dial. Why do it in the most hyped case? It doesn't make sense, right? So I kind of wonder what they're up to. But insofar as your question, your suggestion about increasing production, and alongside the argument that everything's cyclical, what happens when the cycle goes the wrong way? There'll be the market flooded with all the stuff, and maybe the brand value deteriorates so bad that in the next upcycle, they actually aren't worth as much as they are now. So they have to debate with themselves what they view the market cycle is at, and also how long it's going to last, both up and down. So you want to say something?
No, I was just saying that's true. And that's probably why the brands you said, Rolex, Patek, the independent brands, can actually, you say, the main thing is the shareholders, like they can have a long-term approach and try and a bit longer term approach than, let's say, the conglomerate brands. But why is this not the case with Omega right now? I mean, are Omega watches going for like 4x?
Well, yeah, they are now.
I spoke too soon. Yeah.
By the way, you say that there are examples of the brands that are doing this, that are absolutely increasing production. The problem is they're trying to. So take Chopek, for example, right? I remember maybe 2 years ago there was a watch event in London where I forgot what the watch event was called, but it's where a bunch of smaller brands exhibit their watches. Chopek was there. No one cared about
London
it.
Watch Show or something, right?
Maybe, yeah, a smaller one, like not a really big one. It was a very small venue. Nice show, actually. There were a lot of cool. One of them was Chopek, anyway. And I mean, so we got to meet them. Super nice people. I mean, watches are cool. At the time, they weren't priced at the levels they are now, but I think you were getting a lot of watch for your money, right?
I agree.
And then the once the hype train kind of came in, with first started with the usual, the Nautilus and the Royal Oak, then the overseas followed, then everyone's like, what's the next one? I guess it was the GP Laureato, maybe, and then various other cheaper options, alternatives, and then one of them was Chopek. And I guess the hype with Chopek started with the release of that Rattrapante, and that was, I guess, a while ago now, 6 months maybe, or more, a year, I don't recall. But then everyone was signing up to this Antarctic, which is £20,000 or something for the simple one. And I guess they're selling those well in advance of when they can make them. And I think that's them. That's a version of a brand cashing in on the current hype. Because what's happening is, if they're doing non-refundable deposits today, but they're talking about delivery in like 2-3 years, and people are doing it. So people using today's mindset to fuel 3 years time watch demand, or that's just bonkers. Like for me, unless it's something that you deeply love, a Crivier or something where you're already connected with the brand, you are 100% sure that you want that watch, regardless of what, when it comes to you, then no problem. but sort of like a random sports watch, which, it's unclear whether you'd even like it in 3 years' time. Some people will tell you, or they'll tell themselves anyway, that today, they really love it. They love it today, but a lot of the time when people love things today, it's influence. And this is everyone, myself included. No one can sort of operate their opinions in a vacuum. It's not something that anyone can do unless you just don't have contact with people. So when people are on Instagram making statements like, oh, I really love this, it's not because of the hype, I feel they're just lying to themselves.
I think we talked.
I gotta say though, I quite like that watch. After all that,
Again,
I think it's a good looking watch. I think
it's not a criticism against the watch.
You're using it as an example, right?
Which one? Which one?
The Antarctic. It's the sports watch of Chafek, right? I actually think it's a very well balanced watch. Some would say safe design, but it, if you turn it back, right, I think what Flum is saying as well is, if you actually turn that and look at the finishing and what you actually get as a value proposition compared to what you can get on the market for that kind of money, it's actually quite good. Like it's a great watch. I think it's not trying to be a Royal Oak or a Nautilus,
Well, exactly, but I think that and that's okay, and there are many reasons why people would like that watch, and there's clearly many good reasons why it is doing so well. So I'm not at all saying that it doesn't deserve the amount of praise and the demand that it has today. I'm just using it as an example of how a brand sort of doing, because the price went up a lot, right, in the last year or two, I think, and so that's not unusual. Lots of brands, apparently Patek just did a price increase at the boutiques like a couple of weeks ago, unannounced, like it just went there, just a random little 6%, I think. And all the other brands are doing it. I even wrote one about Journe's price increases, which maybe were overdue. You're not getting more watch for your money. They're just taking more of the pie, which
especially because the market price on the secondary market is an indicator of what people are willing to pay, right? And they're probably seeing, they don't make the money on the secondary market. They're like thinking, man, I'm leaving a lot of money on the table. So it goes back to what I said, watch brands, they look to make more money. And right now, when I'm not increasing production, what's the best way to do it? I'm going to increase the price of the product. It's not that similar to when I don't want to hark on and just batter watch brands. As a dentist, right? Like my time was limited. So, if I want to increase how much money I make, I'm going to charge by time, and that's how dentists thought. It was like, okay, £1 a minute, £2 a minute, £3 a minute, like it's down to the minute. So it's only when like you get to a point, right? You basically push it until a point where nobody's paying you that much anymore, right? And you say, okay, I can't get the patients in now. Maybe I need to either stabilize it and just calibrate it so this is the new norm for a while, or I lower them. But if you lower them, you look crap, don't you? So
this is you're right. Prices imply something about your brand as well. Something I spoke about before. It turns out I always, luckily, and this is kind of why I started that blog, was because I always have chats about certain topics, and then later someone will bring it up again and I'll go, oh yeah.
Yes.
And I just find, and it's easier to start from like a basis rather than from scratch each time. So that's handy.
But okay, well, why did you start the blog then? Like, what was the initial motivation or incentive to do so?
It's exactly that. So what happened was, in the beginning of me posting these thoughts on Instagram, sort of putting it out there was a lot of feedback just via stories. So this is just text in stories, the way Daniel writes his book reviews. And so after a while, new people would chat to me and discuss topics that I posted about before. And so I started saving them as highlights, going back into the archive. And then the problem became, after a while, finding a specific highlight was a challenge, because you'd have so many in a row. You're just like, how the hell do I find this thing? So I was like, well, I had this old blog, which was actually formed when, if you remember, I mentioned that startup that I was trying to bootstrap, when I took this job. So that at that time, I'd started this blog. And it was just about motivation, improving your productivity, this type of thing. And so I just sort of changed the name and then added blog posts, the same stories that I posted on Instagram before, but now in a format which I could search for. And then as I had new thoughts, instead of posting them in the story, I just posted on the blog. That's how it started. And now when people discuss topics, I just find the link. There's a search box at the bottom, and I remember what roughly it was about, and I just find the right article. And it's so easy to then have a discussion, because people say, what's your thoughts on this? I'll go send them a link. I'm like, after you read this, then come chat to me. It's super easy.
Yeah. Like, that's the thing with, like, I've stopped necessarily I put the books that I read on stories now, but I never write anymore, because they only last for 24 hours, right? And I used to get loads of people just messaging me and say, can you give me the book list? Can you give me the book list? Like, I want to read the books. Sometimes I think, well, I got a book list from looking at the internet, so all you have to do is just go on the internet. But they want to look at my book list, and now that's why I've made them into permanent posts, because I think it's also more presentable, more digestible that way. You can really flick through and just see, it's quite marked out quite well. So I totally get what you mean. And actually, it kind of resonates with this podcast as well, because, I have this chat, with Jacqueline and Long Long. We talk about watches, and we'd probably be doing it anyway, right? And then we bring on a new person, and, it's always good to meet somebody else in a watch environment. And then we just like talk about watches, right? But you don't want to keep regurgitating the same conversation every single time. And the watch sphere, we already said watches, taking 3 years to get. Watch stories also don't get made like daily news. Yeah, so you don't really want to. There isn't that much to talk. Really to talk about sometimes, And so this is why I like this closed environment. If you want to listen to me, listen to what I say, or I know it's a one-way conversation, but go to the podcast, right? And then, we reach thousands of people right now, and I could never do that physically, like have 1,000 people having a conversation with me, right?
I have these like different groups, sort of different friends. Some are like local, some are based all over the world, and there's so many interesting chats, and there's a few of them who I speak to on the phone like a lot, like at least a couple of times a week, often for at least 30 minutes or more at a time. And I always think, I'm like, man, this would have been such a good episode for any podcast. Like this was such an interesting conversation. And I guess that's useful when you have a podcast like yours, because you can just bring those same topics into a podcast conversation and then just sort of play it through. I really love that. I always wanted, and I think of Clubhouse being the alternative. And I think now, since we were on Clubhouse initially, I think they now allow recordings and you can replay sessions. That's quite handy as well. So I'm going to try and do that at some point.
Yeah, I think you do quite well, because the thing with the podcast, because the longer form content, I had this conversation with a friend. Platforms attract a certain demographic of personality, right? How they want to digest the material. So you have like Instagram, which is quite quick already. Then you've got like short video content, which is 10 seconds, attracts a certain, people that are spending that. I don't want to judge, right? But people are spending that much time on that kind of stuff, right? Well, I'm not doing it. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about it. Yeah. Then podcast is another medium which takes a certain individual. Yeah, well, you have to be able to listen for that long, right? I mean, our podcasts go for a long time. And then you've got like Reddit, people actually taking the time to read, no imagery. You've got Twitter, which is literally like 30 characters. Every medium is out there now to satisfy a certain audience, right? And I think the way it depends on how you want to deliver yourself as well, right? Like, so I think with something like you, Flum, is you love to go so much in depth, all about the detail. It takes time to do that, right? And someone that's willing to spend that time. I mean, you're obviously on the website, so people go on the website, they read, it attracts that kind of audience.
See, I like I said, I sort of flex my involvement to meet my own schedule, right? So when I don't have the time, that's probably the main reason why any of these like steady state platform like yours, your podcast, and any platform really, it works through, you know, momentum, as they call it. So an Amazon product lists new, as it does really well in sales in consecutive weeks, it ranks higher. And I think the same is on, you know, podcasts, for instance. If you do a really good episode consistently every week, you inevitably rank higher over time. But if you do one episode every, you know, month or two or three, it'll be difficult for you to get traction. And I think it's probably the reason why I stick to it as a really casual hobby, because I get super competitive with myself. And so if I started tracking metrics and trying to grow, uh, I'd start putting in too much effort, which I don't have the time to do. So this way, it doesn't matter one way or another. And I kind of, it's relaxed, and mentally speaking, it's easier to deal with, I think.
Yeah, I mean, well, while we're on the topic of the blog, you recently wrote about the Omega in Swatch drop, which I read, but I wanted to ask you again. Like, yeah, what did you think of it? What actually, I want to ask you this. Like, if you were Swatch, what would you have done anything differently? Or made everything the same?
Without hindsight or with hindsight?
Well, with hindsight first, because I'm interested to hear.
Well, are you not talking about the design, right? You're talking about sort of.
No, I'm talking about just how they handled the situation and.
Yeah, so I think what was very surprising to me, and I don't think I knew this at the time of writing, was how few watches they made available for purchase on the day. So that was really surprising to me, and I think I agree. Hayek said, you know, that the people in Geneva, they're doing watches and wonders. They have the watches and we have the wonders. So that was his quote. And I think it's true. If think about any release you've seen at Watches and Wonders, including like the really, really exciting ones, maybe. And the Swatch hype was, I don't know, 50 times that, if not more. Now, that just speaks to something obvious, which you obviously all know, which is that the accessibility price point makes a difference. Mass market products like that, coupled with hype, are unbeatable, right? But they almost did all of this and didn't capitalize on the success because they didn't have the stuff to sell. And if they did, this hype would have continued even longer, right? Because then you'd have hundreds and thousands of people posting their watches online and getting even more traction. And people who didn't get it will be like, oh, I really like that. I want one too. And so the amount of mileage they would have got from the initial hype would have been, I think, far greater. Instead, what we see is nothing much. It was hyped and now everyone's moved on, at least in the watch world, but also outside. I know people who aren't into watches at all, but are my friends, you know, aside from that, and they follow me on Instagram and sometimes see the stories that I post. And one of them texted me, they were like in Dubai and there was a queue outside the mall. And they sent me a photo saying, the only reason I know that what this is about is because you posted about the MoonWatch or MoonSwatch. And so even those people they'd be interested because they'd be seeing what's going on and kind of curious. And now, well, no one really cares. I think the people that want to get it will eventually get it. And I think the loser in this case was the brand in terms of maximizing on the hype. But long term, overall, I think it's not going to be bad for Omega. I joked about it being cannibalizing on their own Omega sales, but really, the people that are in the market for buying a $5,000 chronograph are not going to settle for a £250 plastic watch as an alternative. It's not an alternative at all, in my opinion. So as far as brand strategy goes, this doesn't dilute Omega, in my opinion. But I'm no marketing expert.
I think a popular opinion I was reading online, which was, well, you know, before the MoonSwatch, people were spending a lot more to buy the Omega Speedmaster, but now, you know, people could buy one that looks, I mean, identical design wise, just not different colors and whatnot for much, much less. And they were just talking about the like, how much do you value your design of the Speedmaster to like produce at it at such a low cost in terms of design. And I was like, oh, I think that's an interesting point, because can you imagine if the Nautilus, like they made a plastic Nautilus or I don't know, bio ceramic for $300? Like, how much do you think of your design and of your brand to do that? And I was like, yeah, I think you have a point.
Yeah, but I think also we have to remember back in, you know, why is Swatch Group one of the most powerful watch conglomerates out there is because of Swatch, right? On what they did with that plastic watch. You know, when everything was going kind of very quartzy. So it's interesting that a lot of people got into this like MoonSwatch hype, but there's probably a lot of people and a lot, maybe kids, that didn't even know about the Moonwatch, right?
But now do.
And how many will that actually translate to those actually one day owning a Moonwatch, right? Like putting that seed in their head. Now, considering the hype it created, it's brought awareness to a Moonwatch from a marketing point of view. And in terms of Swatch as a conglomerate, also they make money out of it, like in a really, really accessible way. Also, you know, not too damaging on, if at all, on the Omega brand. And it just gives you that thing, oh, I want to own one, right? Or have experience of one when I'm older.
Fully agree, Dan. I think that's a good point, well made, in the sense that you will never, like, there are more people that hadn't heard of a Moonwatch that will now know about it than people who were trying to buy a Moonwatch but now will buy a cheaper one instead. You see, like that ratio is very much in favor of this being a good idea rather than a bad one.
Yeah, I think most people, if they wanted the Moonwatch, right, they've got one because it's quite an accessible price point. I know that sounds really like, you know,
no, I agree,
dickish of it. It's an affordable, you know, even if you can't afford to pay it outright, I'm sure you can pay the finance, go through finance packages, right? You know, so people who then subsequently then actually paid for a MoonSwatch, right? Like I've got one. Yeah, but would that, do I care? That £250, I don't really like. It's okay, you know. It's like a whim. Right? I'll just go and buy one. It's interesting because I was thinking about buying one, right? And I was thinking, you know, we were both thinking about buying one, right? And then
I actually went to the drop.
Yes, you actually went to the drop. And then it got to the point where, okay, we're not going to get one, right? And now I'm like, I don't want it anymore.
Well, you only didn't want it after I showed you the discoloration photo.
Yeah, I saw the discoloration photo coming onto the person's wrist, and I'm like, oh, you know what? Like, yeah, £250 for a watch. You still, it doesn't forgive like production issues, you know. Like, I would prefer it was even a cheaper product, but it didn't do that, you know.
Yeah.
So that wasn't like.
Would you get one, Flum?
So I said I would definitely get one for my kid. I personally don't want one for myself. I don't think I will use it. So why bother? Like,
I think that's a good point as well.
Like one real.
That's a good point as well. People that buy a proper Moonwatch, yeah, I probably do have like kids, right? Or will have kids at some point. And then what is a good way to get a kid into watches, right? You talk about history, all the stuff that is great about that romantic stuff about watches. It's there in the Moonwatch. Yeah. Give him the Moonwatch. Yeah. You don't care if he bashes it up. Yeah. You really don't care.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so I do this. I sort of don't force watches on my kid, but what I do is try and talk to him about why I like stuff. And what I found, I think I wrote about this one day, was when I try and explain why I like a watch to my kid, I have to be really clear. I can't talk about really philosophical nonsense like, oh, this person's life story resonates with me, and therefore, because kids don't understand that level of, layered emotion. So I have to be really specific and succinct in explaining why I love this watch, and then compare and contrast it with other watches, because that's his frame of reference. He doesn't know about any other watches except the ones I show him. And so when I started doing that, and we'd sit, so I read to him every evening, and then after that, I'd be wearing a watch. So I'd just take it off and, talk about it. And what's really interesting is the questions he asks, like things which I didn't know the answer, like what does this piece do? Like one of the bits, it turns out like not the column wheel, but other bits which connect it. So then we like operating a chronograph while pressing the start and stop and seeing how it impacts the movement. And it turns out this interests him. But if it didn't, he'd be like, yeah, whatever, let's just talk about something else. And so when I explain different dials, or like how, guilloche is done or something like that, it forces me to reflect on what things I have and what I like better than others. And it also helps me think through decisions when it's time to either move things on or buy something new, which is similar to something I have. I'm like, I refer back to these very same discussions I had with my kid, who's about 6. And those are the most enlightening pieces of data in my mind to make decisions, it turns out, which I found quite interesting.
Well, your kid's coming from a point of like not being influenced by anybody. Like when you talk about that vacuum, that vacuum's got one person, which is you, right? And it's true. And if you can formulate the questions in a way which do not have bias in them, I know that's difficult by even just bringing a topic up. You're getting a very pure response. I do exactly.
I do exactly. So I completely agree, by the way. So this is something that I did a course on, which was like, don't steer the answer by framing the question in a specific way. Like don't say things like, why do you like this? That presupposes that he likes it at all, right? So I'm like, I just ask things like, what do you think about this watch? And he'll be like, when he's not interested, he'll say stuff like, oh yeah, it's nice. Because he's very much a politically correct kid, it seems. He doesn't like to hurt anyone's feelings. So if I ask him, like, do you like...
It's England.
Well, no. I don't count my kid as a British kid, but, sadly, he officially is. But yeah, I kind of ask him why he likes it. And for instance, easy example, on the Mad One, he goes, oh, it spins. And like that was the most... This is so obvious. Like saying it out loud, it sounds obvious, but that was whimsical enough that it excited him the most. He didn't care about the fact that the case is made out of plastic or sapphire, whatever it is. He didn't care about how the hard part of the case is, like, holding the glass bit. None of that mattered to him. Like, just for him, he saw the spinning, and that is good enough to excite him. Now, compare that with I'd say like a VC, okay, like the blue dial. Like he didn't care at all about the blueness or how it changes color, but he was most interested in how the date wheel works. Like, what is that number? Like, is that the time? No, it's the date. So we kind of going down the quick set and trying to like explain how that thing moves inside. So what catches his attention in a watch is completely random, like as far as I'm concerned. It could even depend on the day, but it doesn't matter, because when I explain it, after I sort of ask him questions, I've posted some of these videos on my Instagram as well, where I just chat to him about stuff. And I think what I was talking about more was when I have to explain to him, or when I start speaking about it after asking him, then what I end up saying is stuff that I have to really think carefully about, which I was saying is helpful. But in terms of getting him into the hobby, arguably, if he's not into it by the time he's older, he even if I really want to force him into it, I don't think it'll matter. Like, people will naturally gravitate towards things that interest them, and as they get older, they have the actual decision-making ability to actually choose to do stuff it'll work out.
Yeah. A lot of the details in watches are appreciated, through time. We go back to that concept of time, right? And even the romantic aspects of watches. How when we look at how many people spend their time doing that finishing, is because it takes so much time to do that finishing. And our appreciation of somebody doing that for basically their whole life, because of the difficulties we've had with our own life through time, and we value that, actually romances ourselves to go and buy a watch, right?
Well, that's a really good point. So like if we use that in an example, just to help me think through it, I guess if somebody wasted their time all the time, so if somebody was just like a lazy bum that didn't do anything useful, and then you explain to them how some other person spent, I don't know, one whole year making a specific watch from scratch. The fact that that person took 1 year to make the watch, do you think it would make this person appreciate the watch less or more, given that they as a person don't really value their time?
Well,
and then,
yeah, sorry.
And then hold that thought and then compare that to somebody who, like maybe, in your dentist life where time is literally money, and how you translate somebody spending a year of their time making a watch into, you could do a calculation into how many pounds that's worth. So how do you think those two people see the value of handcrafted art effectively differently?
Well, I think like somebody that's sitting on the couch, right? They might find that, I know it sounds silly, but they might find that value, like we actually, no, we look at that and we say,
No, it's true.
More productive people will say, oh, how can you do that? But then like the guy sitting on the couch might say to you, and I'm doing this so ad lib, but he might say, do you know what? I don't know what I want to do yet. So I'm sitting here going to think about what I want to do. And you guys out there running around like a headless chicken, like you don't know what you're doing. Yeah. But aren't you wasting your time? Right. So it would be a matter of perception. And I guess however somebody wants to spend their time is obviously totally up to them. I think the main thing is, are they happy spending that time like that? Does that actually give them fulfillment? Because I think, that's what I try and look for in life, right?
Dan, that's such a politically correct answer. I mean, I was trying to be, I was trying to be controversial on purpose. So of course, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree that what one person, of course, this is inherently true, because if somebody, like aside from medical conditions that cause people not to be able to do anything, whatever people choose to do is arguably what, outside of duress, I'm not trying to generalize, but whatever people choose to do is what they want to do. You don't have to.
Yeah, I agree.
You don't have to do this podcast, and we don't have to buy the watches if we don't like the price or the way the ADs treat us. But all of these are choices, right? And so, I mean, I was just.
What about this then? Well, actually, then, what about this? Yeah, is the fact that somebody lies on the couch, is that indicative of somebody that doesn't value time? Does the value of time, does the appreciation of time, and therefore the appreciation of a watchmaker spending time on making a watch, right? Does that appreciation come from your own experiences to yourself? So for example, and this is going such a tangent, but let's say, I am that guy sitting on the couch, right? But in my mind, somebody in my family passed away, and I regret that I didn't get to spend as much time with that person, right? I didn't actually go out and do stuff, but I have that really deep regret that I didn't spend the time. Like, surely, and that might give them the appreciation of time and the value of it, right? Or spending it with a loved one. So is it the fact that I personally don't use that time effectively to do something? Does that necessarily give me I don't get a value of time? I don't think it does.
Yeah. So this is something, I guess the point we're making here is correlation does not necessarily mean causation, right? So fundamentally, maybe our view of time impacts how we see other people's use of time, but maybe not, doesn't have to be the case. I think I agree. Sorry, Jack. I think you're on mute, Jack.
Jack, can't hear you.
No, it's okay. I just said I saw your message. My answer to the question, and then we'll round this interview up, is I actually didn't think that so politically correct when you said that. I knew you were trying to be a little bit controversial. And it was, just from my initial reaction hearing that question, right? Like if I were a lazy bum, and again, not judging people who are lying on their couches and thinking,
yeah, which is a high potential of people listening to this podcast.
Great. I love it. But say if, you were someone that you wouldn't self-categorize as someone who's very productive, and all of a sudden you heard a friend of yours, or you met a random person at a bar, that he's a watchmaker and he spends a year making one watch. I think positive or negative, like I don't know, the person could go either or, right? But he would probably find that extremely fascinating and be like, wow, like I think it would be difficult for him to fathom, right? I mean, I'm trying to put myself in his shoes. I think it would be difficult for me to wrap my head around it. And again, be it negative or positive. But then if I were someone who's extremely productive, I could be like, almost maybe a little bit judgmental and be like, dude, like, why aren't you doing more with your life? Like,
yeah, I'd like to come in here, and like we talk about, okay, you're productive at that moment, and we talk about time, and we've talked about, very philosophical about time, but actually I think it's about consistency, consistency over a period of time. If you're productive now and you cannot keep it up, right?
Yeah.
It is useless. And then also, when we look at ourselves, how we hold ourselves, what we're trying to achieve in life, whether it's personal or career wise, professionally, a lot of it's about consistency, like going to the gym, making it. We don't enjoy a lot of the things, but that consistency, is a success in itself. So just picking one moment and saying, yeah, I'm productive now, it doesn't really. So what? It's not that anybody could be, right? It's whether you can sustain it over a period of time. And I think that's why we hold these people that can do it consistently day in, day out in high regard, such as athletes. Athletes are another, dedicate their whole life to one aim, right? That is extremely admirable, when the majority of us have trouble with consistency, full stop, let alone with one aim, right? We get pulled left, right, center, everywhere. We can't focus as much as them, because with that, we all know comes sacrifice, right? And it's that sacrifice that also touches us.
So yeah, I agree. But then the flip side, let's just cover the flip side real quick, which is that, that like an athlete is very one-dimensional in that they are really good at that one thing. So they played that sport or whatever from a young age. They mastered it. They honed their skills, and then they became the best in that field. Great. But on the other hand, if you look at Steve Jobs' story, like he just wandered around, he like dropped out. In his time, he went to study random stuff like calligraphy and, things which maybe at the time weren't necessarily useful or relevant, but he later discovered that they became relevant. So at that moment in his life, was he consistent? Maybe not. He may have been consistently attentive in the classes he attended, but he wasn't consistent as a student. And so I think the problem with any of us in this sort of mode of being, outwardly judgmental is that we will never have all the data we need to make a complete decision. So I guess my one concluding point would be, it's okay to explore these thought processes to the end. Like, what if this, what if that? Do you think this person is one way or another? But it's important to then, draw a line and realize that you will never have enough data about that person to be able to speak about them or judge them in any way. And that's kind of why we just shouldn't judge, right? We just sort of take the decision for face value. Whether or not you wish to give them a benefit of the doubt or whatever, it doesn't matter. Just know that you don't have all the data.
I agree. Okay, so we're running out of time here. Should we do quickly the reverse round? So basically, if we can ask us each one question, like whatever you want to ask, could be anything. It could be follow up to what you were just talking about or something completely random.
Okay. This, if you were able to meet Jack, this one's for you.
Okay.
If you were able to meet the late Nelson Mandela, what would you say to him or ask him?
That is very random. Man. Can I come back to that? I need to think about it. I get only one question.
Oh, should I ask you another one?
No, it's only one question.
I do want to answer it. I just need some time to think about it.
Okay, ask my question.
Okay.
Ask me my question, Flum.
So, if you were able to be on a mic to Neil Armstrong while he was on the moon, what would you say? Meaning his first time on the moon.
Okay.
Like you can ask him a question, you can say something. Bear in mind, the whole world is listening to you as well, right?
Can I take the photo with you?
But you're not there.
Oh, I'm not there.
You're on the mic to him, like you're.
I'm on the mic to him.
Yeah, so he's there. He's saying his thing. One small step for man, and you're on the other end. So I think it was the president or somebody that was there, like on the radio with him. So now, if you had a chance to be on the radio,
I would say, hold it there, Neil. This is one small step for man, and one large step for mankind. That's what I would have said.
Wait, but he would have said his thing first. So you can't say that. You just sound like a chump copying what he says.
No, I was trying to say it before he said it. Oh man, that's a tough one.
It's you ask tough questions.
I probably would have naturally. I think I would have said.
There's no right answer.
Naturally, I think I would say, like in the moment, I say, "What does it feel like?"
Yeah.
I think that's what I would say. Like, what does it feel like? And then you go, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Well, everything. Like going to be the first man to the moon, plus actually, how does the moon feel? When you step on it." That's probably what I would ask.
Cool.
I don't think I'd have the capacity. Don't have the capacity to think any more complicated because such a momentous occasion, right?
Is that footprint really his on the moon?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I think I probably would ask that. Did you actually really leave that footprint?
Right. Answer your Nelson Mandela question.
Oh, it's so difficult. Can I say two?
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. The first thing that popped into my head actually was I wanted to ask him what was his favorite meal in prison. Just because of the duration of time he spent in prison.
I think this is available out there. I think I might have read this. I just forget. I'm pretty sure. I think it might have been covered in The Long Walk to Freedom. I just don't remember.
I did read his book though. I don't remember it. Maybe it might have. I read that book in high school. My second question would be, it was covered kind of in this book, but just to dive more into detail, which was, if he had to if he had to sum it up into one sentence, what would he describe himself as? Be it like his living mission, I know what you mean. Let me rephrase.
How does he see himself? Yeah.
How does he see himself after doing so much for the country and everyone? What is the one thing that he is most proud of to have accomplished or not accomplished in his life? Or it might not be a thing, it might be his children or something else. I'm always curious to people who we idolize and how they actually see themselves. Yeah, so
cool.
But I'll probably ask the first question first. Yeah. Okay, so that was the reverso round. And then quick fire. Dan, do you want to ask your questions?
Oh, I haven't brought them up.
I open them up.
Uh,
Now you chose for these to be kind of difficult.
I don't think they're that difficult.
They're not terribly difficult, but we've had easier ones on the show. Let's just say that. So
Okay, one thing that you would get rid of in your life, okay? So don't say something like poverty. If you could just wave a wand right now.
Back pain.
Okay.
Right.
Very realistic.
One person in your life that you know that you dislike, but they don't know it. And you see them quite regularly.
But now I have to say it, and then they'll know it through this.
No,
podcast.
you could say something like your mother-in-law.
That's the point.
Nobody would know.
I think honestly, people who know me know enough about me to realize that if I don't like them, they'll probably know.
No. Yeah.
So
I was gonna say.
I don't think there's anyone out there who I don't like, and they just completely oblivious. I don't think so.
Okay.
I my belief anyway.
Right. Next one. Would you rather live out the rest of your days without internet or no heating?
In which country?
In England.
Jeez.
Is that a difficult?
No. Do you mean no heating at home or no heating on Earth, like anywhere? Yeah.
Wherever you
like,
go,
so
there's no
heating
heating.
does.
Yeah, because you can't just like the
yeah.
internet. You can't just go out and get internet on your phone, right?
No, mate. I'm happy to cut internet for heating, in general. Like it's feeling cold is no joke.
Okay. Right. If you could go back and erase one thing you said or did, what would it be?
Ooh, that is rough. But just to clarify, when you erase said thing or whatever, does all the subsequent repercussions also?
Yes, it's like time travel.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, in that case, nothing. No, I would not do that because the number of future scenarios that would, as you know, one thing in 10 years ago changes. Yeah, but it changes a billion things, and so the riskiness of doing that is and the unknown rather than what I know today is too much for me. So I'd rather not.
For a moment there, you started sounding like Doctor Strange. Right. When was the last time you embarrassed yourself?
I do it every day on Instagram, don't I?
All right. Okay.
Wait, I want to ask the next one.
Okay.
When was the last time you pretended to like a gift when you actually didn't?
Oh, like on my birthday this year.
Oh
no. What was it?
No, let's not go there. It doesn't
matter.
Let's not
go there.
It's the thought
Right. When was the last time, when and what was the last time you got caught doing something that you shouldn't have been doing?
I mean, I just don't really get caught, to be honest. I'm just thinking. So.
That's the alternative answer.
Can I just tell you, these answers, right? Although you're not answering, they're not painting you in the best light.
Oh man,
doesn't make you any less honestly, guilty. It just makes you it makes it obvious that you're not disclosing it.
Well, I'm just trying to think of when I last got caught doing something I shouldn't be doing.
Can't remember.
Yeah, can't remember, honestly.
Okay. Oh, this is interesting. You have been in war zones in your career. Is that right?
Yeah, Basra, Iraq.
Yeah,
and Baghdad. Yeah.
yeah. What's the worst? Actually, is there any beauty to be found in war?
No, even if there is, I think that the suffering is immeasurably worse. So, I mean, for instance, I mean, you see pictures of little kids that are just having a good time in a site of rubble. Sure, that's beautiful to see, but it's almost like pity that comes through rather than
Bittersweet.
just, yeah, exactly. And so I think the sour mood that surrounds it, I feel, is not worth it. Like, it would be better. So just that, yes, there is potentially beauty to be found, but I don't think that's what maybe us on the outside try to focus on to distract from the real issue, which I think shouldn't be the case.
Okay. Right. Last one. One thing that you're seeing that you wish you could unsee.
Hublots in general. Sorry, no, I'm just joking.
You're not joking. You see, that's the most honest thing you've said.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep that.
Did you see that Murakami Hublot?
I don't. It hurts my. I just sound like an annoying idiot when I say these stuff. It's a joke. Like, people talk about why all the hate for Hublot. I don't know. They're a successful brand. They've done really well. Good for them. Shareholders are enjoying it. What I wish I could unsee, I guess, I saw one guy's broken leg bone pop out of the flesh. That wasn't cool. Yeah, I still remember, like, every time I see any bleeding, that thing comes back into my mind. So maybe it's just an example of something I would like to unsee.
Okay.
So when I was in junior high and I was playing basketball, my teammate's finger got broken and the ligaments was just sticking out. And
yeah,
imagine if that was a leg, because it was only a finger and there was just so much there. So I can't imagine the leg. And yeah. So okay. Thank you for answering those questions. That is, I guess, the end of the episode with you, Flum. Thank you so much for coming on. And if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure you go follow King Flum, or you can find his written content at screwdowncrown.com. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you, guys.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
As always, thank you for listening to the Waiting List podcast.
We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. And if you have any questions,
comments,
or feedback,
feel free to reach out to us at the Waiting List Podcast on Instagram or via our private accounts.
We'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.